So as we go through this, if you have questions, we're going to send the microphone your way. Please don't be intimidated, but ask your question freely. And we're about to get started. Oh, it's 10:01. Okay. All right, Mara, we're good to go.
Great.
Here we go. So welcome, everybody. Wonderful to be here with you this morning. If any of you want to come closer to the sides or anything, you're welcome to. But otherwise, just be comfortable. And I will chant a few mantras and we'll get started. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, we are in the idyllic situation here. We got free time. Nobody's got to run off to work or anything like that. We're in a very holy place. And we have an assembly of wonderful people whose interest is the highest interest, the highest pursuit. And that's what we're going to talk about today, like actually the highest pursuit. What is the highest pursuit and how that comes, how it's communicated in Vyasadeva's literature, particularly in Srimad Bhagavatam. So before I get started, I just want to say we've got some time. Like we've got, 8 hours, like four classes of 2 hours. And really, if we want to go longer, we could always find a way to do that too. So we have time to take questions. Please, we're all friends here. Some of us are just getting to know each other, but there should be. Let's let go of any feelings of anxiety that might be within the assembly, and our sole aim here is that all of us, every one of us, walk away from here with a bit, at least having made a step forward in our devotion, a step forward in our understanding, and particularly in the context of the classes that I'll be sharing, a clearer understanding of what's going on in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what's really happening, because it's what we read every day in Wisdom of the Sages. But, I've been studying it for 30 years or so, at least reading from it and hearing from it. And the more that I study, the more that I know about it, the more that I realize I'm just really on the surface of it. I'm seeing things that I didn't see before, and I'm like, oh, how did I not see that before? And I know that I may be doing that many, many more times in life. And so my hope with this is I just want to share with you, it's really a relatively simple construct, a relatively simple idea, but I want to frame it for you. And I want to frame it for you in such a way that it becomes so clear that it's something that will stay with you for the rest of your life. So I'm going to build up to that, and then I'm going to, let me bring you to what I have here. All right, we're ready to start. I guess what I was just saying is don't be afraid to ask questions. and please feel free. I'm happy to take questions. If anything's unclear or if you just want to share something too. And I might even turn to you for reflections too, to just make sure you're all listening. But if we look up here top, these are two different charts. I'm going to talk about what's below this line. And for those that are listening on Patreon or tuning in later on Patreon, Mara has shared in the chat thing a photograph, right? It would be the first thing that was dropped into the chat. And this chart is there. So you can open it up, and as I refer to it, you can look at it. And if anyone's seeing it later on Patreon, we're going to drop that image where this class is posted on Patreon in the details or whatever. So it'll be where you find your link in Patreon, you'll also find this image of this chart. Okay? So from this purple line down, we're going to talk a lot about that today. But let's look at the purple line up. I didn't actually, after I filled out the whole thing, I said, I meant to write more there. So I'm going to explain what this means. It's relatively simple, but let's go through it right now. I wrote here, this is the way that I'm going to progress through this course. I'm going to begin by talking, I'm not even going to begin here, but I'm going to get here. I'm going to speak about, I'm going to take you to the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 4th and 5th chapters. And then we're going to go to the first canto, first chapter. And then the real, for lack of a better word, meat of this class, or the real substance, is we're going to study the second chapter of the first canto in depth. And what I want to illustrate is that this 4th and 5th chapter are going to help set a scene. First canto is going to take that to a scene, and it's going to be questions. Second chapter is going to be the answers. And when you understand those answers to the questions, everything you read in Bhagavatam, you're going to see in relationship to those answers. So what you learn in the second chapter of the first canto, you will see play out through, it's just story after story after story for the next 12 cantos that are reinforcing and reinforcing and reinforcing the same message. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? So it will seem less like arbitrary stories with nuggets of wisdom in them, and it'll become clearer that, oh, they're illustrating that point again this way. Oh, Vyasadeva, through telling this story, is illustrating the same point again from another angle. Oh, he's making that same point. He's drilling that point home. He's drilling that point home. That's what I want you to be able to see. Everybody with me? And hopefully what it's done for me, and what I'm sure it can and will do for you, is it'll make that reading far more rich. And because when the ideas are clicking, reading it becomes more exciting. You're like, oh, I get it. I get exactly why they said that there now. I get how that verse follows that one. And I'm seeing how it all ties in. When you get that feeling, all the pieces start to fit together, and then it just changes everything, because the Bhagavatam is the key to understanding everything about yoga, really understanding everything about life. The Bhagavatam takes us to that point where we really understand everything about life. So I want to show you how the answers in the second chapter, the questions will be in the first chapter, the answers will be in the second chapter, and how those answers will enrich the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, everything that comes from it and through it. But really, the 4th and 5th chapters set it up, although they follow it. And why, sometimes, like you watch a movie and it starts in the future and then it goes back in time, and then, so that's basically what's happening here. Okay? Any questions so far? We good? Okay. So, if I were to give each one of these a title, just to wrap this part up, 4th and 5th chapters, I would call it let's say, the despondency and the mission of Srila Vyasadeva. Because in those chapters it's going to be revealed Vyasadeva was feeling some sort of despondency. Something wasn't right. He could feel inside. Even though I've written so many great literatures and done so much to try to help people, something's not right. And then his guru comes and speaks to him and reveals what's not right and what you have to do. And that becomes his mission. Okay? So we're going to hear about his despondency and his mission. And then this is where he starts that mission. He frames a particular conversation for us wherein particular questions are given that are going to go right to that mission. And then the second chapter is going to answer those questions. And as I mentioned earlier, then everything that comes from the Bhagavatam, so many stories after stories after stories, are more or less part of that mission, part of the same kind of understanding that he wants everyone to get. Because he's given so much literature and he sees people don't understand it. And so he's got to clarify it all. And that's what he does in Bhagavatam. Okay. So, but before we even go there, before we even go to the 4th and 5th chapters of the first canto of the Bhagavatam and have this all laid out, I want to talk about the major concept that this is all about. It's related to his despondency, it's related to his mission, and it has everything to do with the questions and answers that come in the 1st and 2nd chapters. And that is the relationship between 3 ways of seeing the world, or 3 types of pursuit that are listed, that are taught through Vyasadeva's broader literature. Okay? And that is the understanding the distinctions between karma, jnana, and bhakti. These 3 words. Now, the words karma, jnana, and bhakti are used in many ways, actually. Sometimes you'll be reading, like, say, bhakti literature, and jnana is like described as something that every bhakti yogi needs. And then you'll read also in bhakti literature, like almost like jnana is like a terrible thing that you're meant to like abandon and have nothing to do with. You know, there are verses, the great saint and songwriter, poet, Narottam Das Thakur, he wrote one song. How many of you are familiar with Narottam Das Thakur? Raise your hand. Okay, so most are not even familiar. Yeah, a lot of the songs that we sing in our particular lineage were written by this incredible soul, Narottam Das Thakur. He's like, we could give classes and classes, you know, just on Narottam Das Thakur, the depth of his devotion, the beauty of his life. But he wrote one song where he said, Karma Kanda. Kanda refers to, it means the portion of the literature that's about karma. Jnana Kanda, the portion of the literature, really Vyasadeva's literature, about jnana. What is it? Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Kevala Vishara Bhanda. They are like pots of poison, right? Well, then why does Vyasadeva give it to us? Because sometimes something is helpful for you when you're on one level, but when you've taken the next step, it's just going backwards. You have to let go of that and take the next step. That makes sense? Right? So when this is something that's interesting. Like the way that I was raised in my understanding of religion, it was kind of like you have to have faith in the right thing, faith in God, and you have to give up sin, and that's just really what you do. And it's really the same kind of relatively simple idea that everyone has to get a hold of and apply in their life. But Vyasadeva's literature and the yoga literature that stems from his writings is far more vast, and it's a wide range of teachings. It's far more nuanced. It has certain teachings for people that are on one level, and you'll find the teachings, the philosophy, lots of stories to illustrate the philosophy, glorifying a particular way of practicing and a particular way of understanding that's meant to take someone from one level just a little bit higher. And then he'll have a whole nother set of teachings that are meant to take someone a little bit higher. And it sounds like they're contradicting each other. And then they'll take sometimes they give examples of like in simple math, there's 1 + 1 = 2 and so on. But then when you get to higher levels of math, you have things that don't even make sense to someone still on that first level, like 1 - 3 equals, well, how can you have 1 - 3 if there's only 1? You can't take 3 away from it. It doesn't make any sense. But to someone on that higher level of math, it makes perfect sense, and they understand exactly what's going on, and they can grasp it and understand from it, benefit from it, apply it, and so on. So I want to share definitions that we're going to use for this class of these terms, karma, jnana, and bhakti. Because again, these words can be used in different ways, particularly karma and particularly jnana. Jnana is going to be the trickiest one. It's the one that we really need to make sure we understand here very clearly. I think karma will be a little easier. Bhakti is going to stay the same as the way that we always use it. But when you get the definition and how we're using it, and you get the concept and how these three relate to each other, the differences between the three, you're going to have, with that, the key. You'll be holding a key that's going to help you understand not only Bhagavatam, but understand life, understand spirituality, understand the world religions. It applies across the board. It's simple, but very profound. Okay? And so let's do that now. I'm going to define these words, and I'm going to discuss a bit about the difference between them. First one, and we're going to discuss this again. It's great if you note it down and everything like that. And if you're not fully grasping it right now, feel free to ask me any questions. And we're going to keep on this subject nonstop. So even if it doesn't feel perfectly clear right now, I think it will crystallize as we move through these classes. Okay. So let's start with karma. Here, the word karma most fundamentally means action, right? And commonly we use the word to refer to more specifically our occupation or the work that we do, or the actions that we do in the course of life. We need to make money, and we need to care for our family, and so on, and all that goes under the heading of karma. And also the word karma refers to the reactions that come from our actions. And maybe that's the way we use the word most commonly, right? You're going to get karma for that, good karma, bad karma, good or bad reactions that are going to come your way. But we're using this word a little bit different here. The way that we're going to use it here is that with the understanding that every action that I do in this world, every karma that I do in this world, every action that I do in this world, brings a reaction. So every karma brings karma. Already we're using the word in two different ways, right? If I, with that understanding, decide that this is very interesting, now I know something about how the universe works. For every action that you do, it brings a reaction. Good to know. If I do things that are callous to others, if I do things that are cruel, if I'm miserly in life, the actions that stem from those attitudes will bring me bad karma, negative reactions. I will suffer from that. Good to know. And if I want to enjoy life more, well, all I have to do is begin to do good actions, good karma. Let me be nice to people. Let me be generous, right? Let me be kind and sensitive. Let me express gratitude. Let me recognize who I owe in this world, the debt of gratitude to. Let me demonstrate my gratitude to them through ritual, etc. Well, if I do this and follow this really well, then I'll just have good karma coming at me like crazy. And life is going to be much more enjoyable. That's what we mean by karma right here, that attitude, right? That let me operate according to the laws of karma so that I live in this world, that I can live a more happy life in this world, but even like a more materialistically happy life in this world. And it's a relatively pious idea. In other words, the 4 Vedas teach this idea of karma. Do you want the birth of a healthy child? That's not a bad thing to want, right? And so here's a ritual that you can do that will help you achieve that. If you want rain for your crops, well, here's a ritual that you can perform to do that. I just had one astrologer tell me, this is more or less a karmic idea, but even this, I don't want to complicate things too much, but even this can be engaged in bhakti. But like, he said, like if you want to be able to concentrate better, well, the planet and the god of the planet Mercury is responsible for intelligence and communication. And Wednesday is the day for Mercury. And green is the color for Mercury. So if on Wednesdays you wear green, just as a simple way of showing some gratitude, then that God grants you, like, and to us that sounds like, to a lot of people that sounds silly. But to people that are deeply embedded in the culture, they begin to realize that these things work. So that's what we mean by karma here. Does that make sense so far? And so sometimes the word karma kanda is used, and that means out of all of Vyasadeva's works, there's one section where he explains this whole science and all the practices and all the hymns and all the rituals and all of that kind of stuff is all explained in the karma kanda, the karma section of his literature. Before I go further, is everyone here familiar with the name Vyasadeva and who Vyasadeva is? If you're not, please just go ahead and raise your hand and don't be shy. Okay, so then let me share that first before I go further. So, if you were to try to, there's so many books on yoga, modern books, yoga teachers, each explaining their understanding of yoga. There's the vast world of Hinduism, which is very broad, with so many books and so many temples and so many teachers and so many gurus. And then there are the ancient teachings of yoga that come down from masters that they lived many, many centuries ago, and we still know of them today. If you take this entire, and really whole other traditions stem off of this broad tradition. It goes back thousands of years. And even like Buddhism all stems out of this. The whole Buddhist philosophy is stemming from the yoga philosophy of India, right? And then it spread throughout, Southeast Asia. But all of that, every teacher, every guru, every book that is coming from I don't know, maybe I'm going too far if I say every, but practically every, owes a debt and stems from the writings of one sage, and his name was Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva, you can picture a yogi, even you can picture like the Wisdom of the Sages logo, right? If it's anyone, it's Vyasadeva, At least I created the logo, so if I was thinking of it, it's not necessarily Vyasadeva, but that's who I generally think of when I look at that sage. Dreadlocks all wrapped up on his head and long beard, and he's living up in the Himalayan mountains. He's living by the holy river. He's living a very pure life, and he has a mission to, as the Kali Yuga comes, as the darker age comes, to take the Vedic tradition, the Vedic yoga teachings that are eternal, but have always been handed down orally, and recognizing that the age that we're coming to is a darker age where people have short memories and be less capable of understanding. It needs to be edited and written down. And so he composes the Vedic literature, a vast body of literature. That literature includes, and I'm going to talk about these categories of literature in more depth, the 4 Vedas, they're very vast. It includes the Upanishads, 108 more books, questions and answers between sages and yogis and their disciples in the forests. It includes the Mahabharata, which is 100,000 verses. A book that's like, I don't know how many times bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey put together. Beautiful Sanskrit verses full of yogic information, but told through a story now. And it includes the Puranas, 18 collections with tens to, I don't know if there's hundreds of thousands of verses even in some Puranas. At least there's like tens of thousands of verses. The Srimad Bhagavatam is one of those Puranas. It's 18,000 verses, but I think there's other ones that are at least like 60 or 70,000 verses and 18 collections of those books. He also wrote a condensed presentation called the Vedanta Sutra, which becomes a very important book in the in this greater literature and in the yogic tradition. That's who Vyasadeva is. Everybody, every yoga teacher, their teachings are everything that we know about karma and reincarnation and yoga, and it's coming from his teachings. Sometimes it may be elaborated on or twisted on or adapted in different ways, but it's all coming from him. So he's this incredibly important figure, Srila Vyasadeva. Sometimes he's just called Vyasadeva, sometimes he's just called Vyasa, sometimes he's called Veda Vyasa, but Srila Vyasadeva, that's who we're talking about. Okay? Any questions about Vyasadeva before we go forward? Yes?
How long ago was he on the planet?
Well, it's said that it was at the turn of the Yuga, right? So that's like 5,000 years ago. But you hear about him like throughout, you'll read about him in his own books. You'll read about him in the Bhagavatam. You'll read about him in the Mahabharta and throughout the Puranas. You'll hear about him in not his own books, but in the Ramayana. So how far he has an incredibly long life. Let's put it that way. And I believe that there are people that can see him in the Himalayas to this day. So he's not like an ordinary. He is called a Shaktavesha avatar, which means that he's not God himself, but he's especially uniquely empowered by God with a particular mission. So he's almost like he's got so much ability and long life and all of that. So great soul.
I have a question. Are
Yes.
all these books, like, actually, I mean, in this moment, all of them are existing, or people are studying them?
Yeah, so the question is, are all of Vyasadeva's books still existing? They all still exist. Now, some of them may have been adulterated to some degree or another. Some of them, even secular scholars feel quite satisfied that they're not. But they're all there. Yeah, they're all there. I mean, there may have been some things that have been lost in time, but all the categories that I've just described, they're all there. All right. Yes?
How do we know he is an avatar?
You,
Taking his word for it, or was he proof?
well, his position is a little tricky because he's the one that's in his books. It's listing who all the avatars are, and so yeah, he's also included in there. So people that are of the faith, people that accept his tradition with faith, will accept that he's a Shaktavesha avatar. People can always, doubt it, and they're free to. In other words, I guess the question is like. The significance of the question is, therefore, can we trust his writings? Like, are they really like God inspired? And I think, my own experience is that the more that I look at this, what secular scholars will do is they'll try to break it down and they'll say, well, whoever wrote this book definitely didn't write this book because they're written in a different style. And so Vyasadeva is more like a legend, and different people have written as if they're Vyasadeva over the course of the centuries, and they'll explain it like that. I always find those arguments weak, the logic in them weak. I say it's kind of like if you look at Meet the Beatles and the White Album, you could say this is definitely a different band. No, it's not a different band. It's the same band, but at a different point of in their career, expressing something different in a different way, and which plays into like where we're getting at, because when you get to the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is his, do they call it like a swan song or something like that, like kind of like your last, final, most important work that not only is the most developed, but in this case, very importantly, it's his last work that's meant to clarify everything so that you can understand all the other work. That's the real point that I want to get to today. And then what is it that he's trying to share? Right? And I also use another example sometimes to help understand this, is that there was this Woody Allen film, Annie Hall. And in that film, there's one scene where he's in line to see a film with his girlfriend, Annie Hall. And it's some avant-garde film, you know. And behind Woody Allen and his girlfriend in line are two intellectuals, a man and a woman. And the man is going on and on about the significance of the film and the significance of the writer and director of the film and what they were trying to convey. And Woody Allen is hearing this person go on and on with his interpretation, and it's really annoying to Woody Allen. He's like, his girlfriend can see he's getting upset, and she's like, "What's the matter?" And he's, "Oh, this guy is just like, he completely misunderstands the whole thing. He doesn't get it." And she's like, "Well, it's no big deal. Just like, let it go." And then the guy's going on and on more, and Woody Allen's getting more and more frustrated. You know, everything he's saying is wrong. It's off. He doesn't get it. And he's so pompous, and you know, and she's like saying, "Well, calm down," you know. And then he's going, the guy's still talking. So Woody Allen finally just loses it. You know, he can't take it anymore. He turns to the guy and says, "I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt here. You do not know what you're talking about. You're totally misinterpret the work of this writer. You don't get it at all," you know. And then the guy, you know, answers back, "Well, I happen to be a professor at Columbia University, and my specialty is the work of this writer," and blah, 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 blah. And so they're going back and forth. And then Woody Allen says, "Just 1 second, just wait right here 1 second." And he steps out of the screen, and then he comes back into the screen, and he's got the author himself right there. And he says, "Could you talk to him?" And then the author says, "You totally misunderstand everything that I've said. You know, Woody Allen here is completely right, and you've misunderstood everything I'm trying to convey," you know. So in a sense, that's what happens with Srimad Bhagavatam, is that the author of all the Vedas comes back and speaks to a tradition that is divided about how to understand all of this literature and clarifies it all. That's what's happening in Srimad Bhagavatam. That the author had presented some teachings for some people and some teachings for other people and some teachings for a third category of people, according to their progress along the path. But people are looking at the whole thing and they're trying to decide what's most important. And sometimes they're looking at the early teachings or the middle teachings and saying, this is what's important. And he's coming forward and saying, no. There's a progression going on here. Okay? Sometimes we think that the things that are the oldest are the most authentic, right? But if we looked at, let's say, our childhood education and that, well, does that mean that what we learned in first grade is more authentic than what we learned in 12th grade or in college? Right? So sometimes things that are the oldest are the most authentic, but sometimes the most important things, sometimes there's a development going on. And it's not till you get to the end that you really understand everything. And so that becomes most important. So what happens is Vyasadeva in the Bhagavatam is going to clarify everything. We're going to talk about the story about how all that happens. Okay? And once you get that, everything opens up and everything starts to make more sense. All right? More questions? Anybody? Okay. So far of the three, I've described a bit about karma. I'm going to describe more about that, but we define that term. Can anyone here raise their hand and just in a simple way, you don't have to nail it exactly, but at least if you get part of it, what we mean in this context when we use the word karma? Anyone want to try? Yes, Dorita. Okay, now that's the most simple definition. But in the context that we're using it here, can anyone? That's the next way that we use it. The reaction to the action is another. So karma can mean an action. Karma can mean a reaction to an action. But in this context, what karma means, and we're going to get this right now. We're all going to get this right now, okay? And we're not going to go forward until we all get it. Karma is a way of looking at the world. It's the idea that the point of life, you could say the goal of life, is to act well in this world so that I can get good reactions and enjoy this world. So that type of thinking, we're going to call it karmic, right? let me go to the temple, worship Ganesha, with the idea that if I make him an offering of fruits and say some prayers to him and chant some hymn to him, assisted by the priest in the temple, that in the future my business will do well and I'll make more money and therefore I'll become more happy. That's karmic way of thinking. Everybody with me? Now, if you want to develop that further, let me live my entire life being a good person, according to the way that the 4 Vedas teach. Let me be kind, let me be generous, let me be pious and holy, let me be clean, let me be, let me express gratitude to the gods for all that they give me. The rain comes to me from the gods. The sunlight comes to me from the gods. The moon, which gives flavor to the vegetables, comes from the god. The winds, the earth itself is a goddess. I can't just walk through life being oblivious to all of that and just exploiting it. That's going to bring me all kind of bad karma. Let me appreciate it. Let me appreciate all that's been given to me, and let me show that appreciation by going to the temple, doing a ritual, having a priest that knows how to do the ritual, help me do the ritual. And then all these good things are going to come. And in my future life, if I do this really well, if I follow all the rules really well, then in my next life, I could be born on the higher planets in the universe. Right? And then it's like a whole nother level of happiness and enjoyment going on up there. And that goes on for a long time, right? That's your good karma, you know. But that good karma is like a bank account, right? It's just like, you know, you come to beautiful tropical Cali, Colombia, for the Americans here. You guys are obviously have more pious credit than us because you get to stay here. But we're all going to spend our money eventually, and then we got to go back to work. You know, there's rent to pay, and there's, you know, so you go up to the higher planets based on the merit of your good karma, but you spend it, and it starts to tick away, and eventually you come back down. So all of that kind of thinking, we're going to call karmic. Does that make sense? Okay, now would someone like to raise their hand and share? Again, you don't have to express it exactly right, but what do we mean by karmic here? Yes, storyteller.
It's like you said before, like the karma is the way that we look the life, and also how we expect about receive about the life. So if I do something, I receive something, but most of the time we expect for the good things. So
Yeah, you got to the essence of it, that I'm going to do something, I'm going to get something, all right? I'm going to be pious, I'm going to get a good result from it. I'm going to give some charity. In my next life, it's going to come back 10 times, right? I'm going to do a nice ritual for this goddess. I can expect to get wealth. I'm going to do another ritual to respect this particular god, and I can expect the rain will come so that my crops will grow nicely. And not only does this bring me happiness, but the whole society functions better if everybody gets this, because now in one sense, it sounds very almost petty and unenlightened, but in another sense, it's far more enlightened than like most of the world is operating right now. It's actually in tune with nature, right? Like the sunlight that most people are just walking around taking it for granted. The person that's studying the karmic kunda, the karmic literature of Vyasadeva, is saying there's a great soul who's been given the responsibility to provide us warmth and light, and that's called Surya. He's the god of the sun. And when I wake up every morning, if I'm a decent human being, I'm not like a spoiled little child that doesn't appreciate everything that's been given to them, but I see the sun and I say, thank you, Surya. And then maybe I do some Surya Namaskaras, right? That's offering my obeisances to Surya in appreciation for all that he gives us. Yes, Adrian.
So is it understood in this concept as karma is in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam to a link to jnana? So you are a pious person and you do like good actions. At some point, your interest is gonna shift and
Yeah.
you may be gonna get rid of that attachment to future fruits, and you're gonna get to the point of okay, so I understand it's actually a
Yeah. So,
going on.
so Adrian had a great question. Adrian, I'm saying Adrian, but I should more in the proper way to say it is your name?
My name?
Yeah.
Adrian.
Adrian. Adrian. Okay. So his question was a really good one. And that is, so is it expected that you practice this karmic idea for some time and it matures? In a sense, you gain certain realization from that and you move to a higher level. And that's exactly the idea. That's exactly why, because the idea is, in one sense, again, it's far more in tune with nature and far more developed to see the world this way than what's called vikarma. The stage before this is called vikarma. It means I see the world meant for my enjoyment, but I don't even follow any teachings. I don't even recognize any gods or God. I just see it as a place for my exploitation, right? Like wherever I see something that's enjoyable, I try to take it without recognizing that anybody's given it to me. So that's called vikarma. Karma means, no, let's still enjoy the world. That still is the point of life, but let's do it in a more refined, dignified, in tune with nature, in tune with the gods, in tune with God way. But you're meant to get something from that. You're meant to, you see, because the 4 Vedas are the section of Vyasadeva's books that teach this. And built into the ritual is information that's going to kind of maybe start to open your mind, right? Like let's say, and I don't know so much about, I haven't studied the 4 Vedas, but I'm going to share something. It's my idea of how it plays out based on it's a somewhat informed kind of way of explaining it. But let's say that I just got married and my wife and I want to conceive a child. And so we want that child to be born healthy. We want that child to have an auspicious future. We want the whole birth process to be smooth. So the Vedas teach about how to go about getting this. And that means there's a certain ritual to perform. I don't know how to perform the ritual. I don't know the mantras that are involved. I don't know the details of the ritual. For that, I go to the priest, the brahmana. Right? Now, the brahmana here is a person that's going to live a more sattvic life. They're going to have a little bit more clear understanding about life, ideally. They're going to come into my home, or I'm going to go to the temple before the god or the goddess that I'm going to be worshiping here. And they're going to chant hymns. And within those, like they might chant, for instance, like there's a famous prayer called the Purusha Shukta. How many have heard of the Purusha Shukta prayer? So not many. Purusha Shukta. Purusha means person. But in this context, it means the original person, the person. It's like saying it like that, the person, right? Like, and that means the person that all other persons stem from. And so the Purusha Shukta is prayers, hymns to Lord Vishnu. And basically it's saying everything comes from Lord Vishnu. The universes come from Lord Vishnu. The gods and the goddesses come from Lord Vishnu. It's describing how everything in this world is temporary, but Lord Vishnu goes on, and how on his time scale it's like way beyond our time scale, and it's a hymn glorifying how Lord Vishnu is beyond everything. And as we hear that, and he's our shelter, he's the shelter of all humanity, and all that. Even though you're doing this ritual for something of this world, you get a bit of a vision for the other world. And you begin to think of, why am I stuck in this cycle? You begin to hear, there's got to be more to life than being in this cycle of birth and death and birth and death. And that's what the karmic idea leads to. Okay, so then what's the next stage? Jnana. Okay? Does everyone have a decent grasp on the karmic idea right now? Yes. Tell me your name again. Melissa, yes.
Can karma, like good karma, be gained by internal thoughts, or is it mostly like physical actions?
The idea is that the physical actions, they not only, and this relates to Adrian? Okay. This relates to Adrian's question too. If I have faith in this literature, and my goal in life is to enjoy this world, then I'm going to begin to apply it. And so that will mean I'll act in a certain way. But those actions will cultivate a type of thinking. And so they're feeding one another in one sense. My actions are feeding my thoughts. And then my thoughts will feed my actions. My actions, and you're cultivating a certain mindset. Right? Okay, nice question. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, and maybe you've only got this concept 50% right now, right? Like with this karmic idea and everything. You've never read these books. It's all a little unfamiliar, but you have a little bit of it now, a good chunk of it, and as we go forward, it's going to become more clear. Let me start using this chart. If you look here, it says, what is this world? Okay, and for a person that's in this karmic mentality, they think this world this is reality, right? And reality is an object of my enjoyment. I want to, when they look at the world, the way that they relate to the world is this is meant for me to enjoy, right? I want to enjoy sex. And for that, I'll need, a partner. And through sex, we'll have children. That's something else I'll enjoy, the love of the children, right? I want to enjoy the comforts of home. These are the pious things that a follower of the Vedas will see as the source of deep enjoyment. Our ideas are far more like degraded nowadays, right? But this is the way that they understand material enjoyment. Love, material love, sex, children, wealth, an opulent home, a good reputation. All these things will lead to enjoyment in this world. So when they look at the world, they think, this is what's meant, this place is meant for me to enjoy. But the Jnani, when we get to Jnana, when they look at the world, they think this is an illusion. And it's not a place meant for me to enjoy. It's actually a big trap, right? That I need to escape from because it's a place of suffering. This person is looking at the world and thinking, this is a place for enjoyment. This person is looking at the world and saying, this is a place of suffering. Look at it. Think about it. And so if you read the four Vedas, it'll give you instructions about how to enjoy this world. But when you get to the books called Vyasadev's books, called the Upanisads, 108 books, conversations between the sages in the forest. These are renunciates. These are people that have examined life with a clearer type of thought and recognized all those pleasures that you talk about, the pleasures of sex, the pleasures of home, all those comforts and enjoyments, that they actually entangle you. And even if you do good actions and receive those reactions, at a certain point in time, you lose them. And that loss causes pain. And we're stuck in cycles of feeling happiness, pain, happiness, pain, happiness, pain, happiness, pain. And this has gone on for how many lifetimes? And when you really look at it from a broader, you just look at it, it's all pain, right? And not only that, not to be too negative and too pessimistic, there's an optimism to it, right? But you are not this body, and the enjoyment of this body is not your purpose in life. You, aham brahmasmi, you are spirit. I am spirit, right? And by spirit, it means I'm eternal. And spirit is blissful and full of knowledge and understanding. Sat Chit and Ananda. You are spiritual, you are eternal, you are blissful, you are full of wisdom. Underneath is covered right now. But when you uncover that potential, you'll be free. And there'll be no more suffering. And you'll enjoy the bliss of your own existence. Isn't that, when you reach that level, those enjoyments in life that you think are so great, even the enjoyments on the heavenly planets, will seem paltry. They'll seem insignificant. For someone that's experiencing the true nature of the soul and has left behind the material world and all the material desires, then you get to real happiness and not this artificial, temporary, petty, illusory happiness of this world. We call that jnana or knowledge. This person is lacking knowledge. They see, I'm this body and let me enjoy this body. This person has jnana. They have jnana means knowledge, deeper insight. And the books that they're reading from Vyasadeva was encouraging one person, okay, don't be a vikarmi. Don't be a person walking through this world that wants the things of this world but doesn't show appreciation, is very uncivilized, right? If you want the things of this world, then I'm going to write you a whole set of books that's going to help you get the things of this world, but it's going to make you a better person in doing it, right? It's going to bring you a little closer to that spiritual thinking, a little bit. But then at a certain point, you're going to begin to see there's got to be more to life than this. Because even when I get the things that I want, I'm still not happy. I still suffer. There's got to be something more. And then you go to the Upanishads, right? That makes sense to everyone? Any questions before I go on? We're opening up a whole new level of conversation here. Right? Okay. So, I'm going to go down this way and cover all three of these questions that I ask. With karma, if we say, what is this world? If you ask the karma kandi, the person that follows Vyasadeva's teachings on karma, accepting them as the highest thing, then they will say, this world is meant for my enjoyment. And if you ask them, what is God? God is the one that supplies me the things that I want. That's how they see God. There are books that are so blatant about this, that they just say that if you do a particular action, a particular karma, the demigods are bound to give you the result of that. Even they don't like you, even, it's just like, it's really 100%, it's like 100% a mechanical deal. Just like I know if I go to the grocery store, doesn't matter what I look like, doesn't matter if I'm a nice person, if I give them the money, they're going to give me the product and we've made our exchange. And the person in the grocery store has a responsibility and they're bound to give me what I paid them for. So the gods are just like that. You do the ritual, you behave a certain way, they give you what they're meant to give you, and that's how life works. Like that. That's called the karma mimamsa philosophy. The karma mimamsa. There's a teacher that's written books on this, and he explains how it all works, like that. So, how do they see God? What did Raghunath call it? Amazon Prime, metaphysical Amazon Prime. They give you what you are supposed to get.
You get more attached to it, no?
That's the way the material world works. You get accustomed to it. But you may also, but even that's the thing, you will get more attached. The more you indulge in it, the attachment deepens. But at the same time, you may feel some sense of dissatisfaction growing. It's just like you have a bag of potato chips, you're eating, you can't stop eating, but even you're not feeling good anymore, right? But you're still eating. You're suffering, you're still eating more because you're attached. So the material world's like that. And then by the blessing of some sadhu, by hearing from some brahmana, you start to get this idea, right? The Jnanic idea. Okay, and then finally, what is the goal of life? The goal of life is to enjoy the material world. That's how the karma kandi sees things. Okay. Now the Jnani sees things differently. They're more developed. They see this world not as a place for enjoyment, they see it as illusory, they see it as a place of suffering. It's a realm that we're meant to transcend. It's a prison that we're meant to escape from. We need to break free from it. When you break free, then you're going to understand real happiness. And that's where the whole Buddhist idea stems from that as well, right? It's the Buddhist, they look this world as a place, it's a very Jnanic tradition, right? Not a particularly devotional tradition. Although there are aspects of devotion, I'm not so well informed on Buddhism, but from what I understand, there's some aspects of devotion that have filtered into it. But primarily it's a Jnanic kind of idea. This world is a place of suffering. Cultivate the right qualities so that you can break free and ultimately not have to suffer anymore. Okay. What is God? This is a tricky question because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has explained that you can practice jnana, which means, how does this practice take place? It has a lot to do with contemplation, reflection. What am I enjoying here? Right? Is this really enjoyment? Am I this body? Or is this body just a bag of elements? And I'm separate from it. I'm not this body, actually. I'm observing the world through this body, even through the mind. So it's this kind of contemplation and reflection that is the jnanic process. But it's usually accompanied with, externally, with renunciation. Leaving the world behind, leaving the family behind, leaving the occupations behind, leaving one's social world, wandering off to the forest, living in solitude, contemplating these truths deeply, practicing austerity, comforts of a bed, comforts of sex, comforts of family, tasty foods, etc., etc. All of it's illusion. So let me disengage from it. Does that make sense? I'm going to share an analogy now that's going to help you understand a bit about the jnanic path. Ready? Let's say Dorita is my friend, and Dorita is dissatisfied with her life in this world. And I say, well, Dorita, we were talking about this on the show today. I say, Dorita, I can create a virtual reality for you with a computer, right? And let's say we're like a few decades ahead, and it's like the computer technology and everything is more developed. So I say, Dorita, I'm going to give you these goggles and headphones, and even your entire body, you're all the way through, is going to be connected to electrodes or something like that, right? And so you're going to be able to smell, you're going to be able to feel tactile touching, you're going to be able to move around and move things within the virtual reality. And I'm going to make some really nice arrangements for you there. So you plug into the whole thing and you're all set to go. And I've made you a home. And, I say, Dorita, if you could have any man for a boyfriend, who would it be? And you tell me who that is. I've created him inside the thing. What would you like your home to be like? I can create it in there for you. And, what else would you like? And I can put it all in there. And now you go into that virtual reality. And you're living in there, and life is great. I mean, you are enjoying things, and it's quite a thrill. And I'm noticing, you're sitting here right next to me, but you're in another world. And I'm witnessing through the computer what you're doing and how you're thinking and what you're experiencing. And I'm saying, Dorita's getting lost in this world. Right? Dorita has taken the artificial world to be real now. This is called jnana, right? Now she's in illusion. Now she's taken, this is how the jnani looks at this world. They think it's an illusion. And I see she's lost. And I know her real potential is far more outside of that illusory world, but now she wants to stay in this world, right? And so I send in a messenger, right? First thing I do is this. I say, this world is too good. She'll stay here forever if I don't change it a little bit. So I have a CD, and it's called Time. And I put in the CD, I download it onto the hard drive, and I install time into the virtual reality. So now everything that you're enjoying is disappearing. It comes, but then it goes. And now the world is not quite as enjoyable as it used to be. And it's got Dorita thinking, this is really nice, and I still want everything in this world, but why does it have to go? Why do I have to lose a loved one? That boyfriend dies. Oh. Now, it's like, now that was really painful, and so on. So, but you still want another boyfriend, right? Or you lose your home, but you still want, I gave you a great job in there, but you lost that job. Now you want another job, right? And then I put in karma. I download karma into it. Now every action you do has a reaction and so on. And then I send in a messenger. And that messenger says, Dorita, I have something to explain to you. And what I'm going to explain to you is knowledge, is jnana. You need to know this. You need to know that you are in an artificial world. This is not the real world. You have an existence beyond this. Okay? I want you to, and you're like, what are you talking about? This is the world. I don't need to hear this nonsense. I'm like, no, you need to hear this. And there's an element working that's called time. So everything that you do, and everything that you get, and everything that you enjoy, you're destined to lose it. Just look around you. Don't you see how time is working on everyone in this virtual reality? And still you're attached to these things. And yes, they bring you a little satisfaction, but then it goes. And they bring you a little satisfaction, then it goes. But Dorita, this body that you think that you're in is not who you are. And you have a real existence outside of this. Okay, and now you're beginning to think, maybe this person's onto something, right? Maybe there's truth to this. Starting to go from here to here, right? Starting to think, maybe this world isn't meant for me to enjoy. Maybe there's something beyond this. And so now you're beginning to apply jnana in your life. But now things get tricky. I don't know how well this fits into the analogy, but let's say somehow or other, someone's put a lock on your virtual reality and you have trouble getting out. It's not like you can just take it off. But they've locked you into it, and there's a condition to get out. You don't get out until you 100% realize to the very core of your being that this is illusion. And that realization has to be so deep and so strong and so clear that even though you're in the virtual reality, you have no desire for any of it. You understand? You 100% clearly get it. This isn't real and I don't want to have anything to do with it. That makes sense? And then once you get that 100%, you're free. We'll let you out. Okay? And there'll be no more suffering. But the problem is this, is that the more you engage with that virtual world, the more you hug the boyfriend and he says sweet things in your ear, the more you eat the delicious food, the more you lie down on your comfortable bed and enjoy these things, the more that you begin to forget what that messenger told you. And you're thinking, this is real. My boyfriend's real. My bed is real. This food is real. And isn't it so nice to enjoy them? And so now you're getting lost. So the more that you engage with the virtual world, the more you fall into illusion. But you can't get out of the trap until you're completely free of illusion. Everybody with me? Okay, so here's the big question. If the more that I engage with the virtual world, the more that I become bound, and I want to become free, then what do I have to do? I want it in one word. Close, very close. She said austerity, very close. In what sense it's the right answer? Well, I'm going to say it one more time and listen to the language closely. If when I engage with this world, I fall into illusion and become attached, then if I want to become detached and free, what do I have to do? Madhu. Disengage. Yeah, disengage. I need to disengage from this virtual reality. I can no longer play the game, because the more I hug the boyfriend, right, the more that my beautiful children come and this is the way jnana, in the practice of jnana yoga, it has an element of stoicism and an element of what's the word I'm looking for? Definitely renunciation, but like coldness, like it's stark and cold, and it means you harden yourself a little to this world. So like jnana yogic literature is going to say, like, when your little children are taking their first steps clumsily, and they're speaking their first words to you in broken language, and it's just so adorable, that's all illusion. Right? And your heart is melting. Cut that out. Walk away. Yeah, run away from that. Because how many lifetimes have you gone through this? How many lifetimes have you had a beautiful little, you were a dog and you had a beautiful puppy? You were, a cat and you had a beautiful little kitten and you thought they're mine, and now you're human and you have a little, beautiful little child there. But you're going through cycles of this, and every time you think this is real, and every time you think this will go on forever, and every time you try to ignore the fact that it's going to end, and every time you suffer. Right? So walk away from it, disengage, because the more you engage, the more you fall into illusion. Disengage, walk away, renounce, contemplate truth, and then you're going to break free. That's the path of Jnana Yoga. Make sense? Have any of you read the book Siddhartha before? Okay. Siddhartha. The Colombians have heard? Hermann Hesse. Okay. Very famous. In America, it became a big book. In Europe, but in the 60s, it became very popular. It was a book about, such a brilliant book. It's the story of a person that meets Buddha. And his name is Siddhartha. This is 2,500 years ago in India. And it opens up describing Siddhartha. He's young, he's handsome, he's very intelligent. He's practicing meditation with his friend who's named Govinda, right? And the book opens up with them in their meditation. They come out of their meditation that they do every day together. And Siddhartha says to Govinda, "So Govinda, how was your meditation today? How do you feel about your progression on this path towards liberation, towards freedom?" And Govinda says, "I think everything's going quite well. Every day we do this, and I feel a little better every day, and it's working. And I think, how do you feel, Siddhartha?" Now, Siddhartha is like he's such a brilliant, intelligent, handsome, charismatic person. And for Govinda, it's his best friend, but also it's like he really admires Siddhartha, right? So they're like friends, but at the same time, he's more like the follower of Siddhartha. And so he says, "How was your meditation? What do you think, Siddhartha?" And Siddhartha says, "I think we're getting nowhere. I think we'll go on for our entire life doing this meditation and never achieve the goal of it. I don't think there's anyone in our village who ever has and that can teach us this. And I think we're just playing a game here. We're not really getting anywhere." And like Govinda's like, "Oh, that's kind of heavy." And then he says, "And another thing, I've had enough of this." And he says, "You see those men over there?" And it's like these sadhus, like these half-naked, they're dreadlocks and ash covering their bodies, and they're just passing through his village. "Tomorrow I'm going off with them, and I'm never coming back. And I'm going to achieve the goal of this." And like, Govinda's like, when he hears this, it scares him. It's like, this is my best friend, and I love him, and he's just gonna go. And, he's trying to convince him, "No, this is stick with this, And Siddhartha's like, "Let us not waste any more words." It's like that. Like that's that Jnanic thing, right? This is his friend. He loves him, but he's like, to achieve the goal, I must move forward. And then there's an incredible scene where Siddhartha now goes and tells his father. His father is like a brahmana. He's like one of these kind of priests, and he's a meditator himself, and he's sitting doing his ritual, and Siddhartha walks into the home, and he's behind his father who's sitting in meditation, and he doesn't say anything, and his father can sense his presence. And his father says, "You have something to say?" And Siddhartha says, "Tomorrow I leave with the sadhus." And his father just think about what I found so brilliant about this book is he writes so poetically, and he encompasses so much in so few words. But in this little scene, which is just a few paragraphs, it describes Vedic culture, what it values, the relationship between father and son, the character of a yogi. There's so much in it. So his imagine the son says, "I'm leaving home tomorrow, I'm never coming back." What does a normal father say? How do they react? But this is the way his father sat there silently for a moment. And he said, "No, tomorrow you will not go with the sadhus." And then Siddhartha's answer, he says, "Tomorrow I will go with the sadhus." Then his father says, "You will disobey your father?" Siddhartha says, "No, I will not disobey my father." So what does that mean? it means his father, well, this is what happens. His father gets up, walks away. Siddhartha stays exactly where he is. His father goes to bed. He can't sleep. He gets up 1 hour later, he goes back and looks in the room, and Siddhartha is standing exactly where he was standing. Right? He hasn't budged an inch. He goes back to go to sleep, he can't sleep. He comes back an hour later, Siddhartha is still standing there, staring in the exact same direction. He does this all night, hour after, and then he begins to realize, my son is already gone. His conviction is so deep. Even if he stayed here, he wouldn't be the same person. He's given up this life, and he's not coming back. Right? So then he even at like late in the night or early in the morning, it's described his knees were shaking, but he was still standing there like that. He realized he's gone. So his father says, okay, Siddhartha, tomorrow you go with the samanas, you go with the sadhus. And he says, and if you learn from them how to achieve bliss, then you come back and you teach it to me. And if you don't find it, well, then you come back and we'll continue to do our meditations together. Now go say goodbye to your mother. And so then Siddhartha says goodbye to his mother, and then he goes and he starts to find these men. And as he's going, and the sun's rising, and he's going off to leave his world behind, Govinda comes running behind. Govinda says, I want to go with you. And so they go together, they approach these men. And it begins to describe their practices, and their practices of austerity, fasting. First thing he does is he takes his nice clothes, he gets rid of them, he just puts some rag around his waist. No more nice clothes. We get enjoyment from nice clothes, right? We get a nice new shirt, a nice new dress, or something like that. We put it on, we feel good. No more of that anymore. No more of the thinking how I should look and how it appears to others and what's going on in their minds when they see me dressed this way. I renounce it all. He puts a rag around him. They ask for permission to follow the sadhus grant permission. And it's describing, how they fast. They fast for 10 days. They fast for 40 days. He's becoming skinnier and leaner. A rough beard is growing on his face. And and as they pass through the different villages, how is he seeing it? He's seeing all different kind of people. He's seeing mothers breastfeeding their children. He's seeing business people doing their business. He's seeing princes going off to do the hunt. He's seeing prostitutes, in the streets, trying to attract suitors. He's seeing lovers embracing. And how does he see it? He's seeing with the Jnanic point of view, this is all illusion. This is all a lie. None of this leads to happiness. It's all fake. It's all phony. None of it's real. And he's hardened himself to it all. He's not buying it anymore. Everybody with me? That's kind of the Jnana Yogic perspective. Renounce this world. Leave it behind. So, I don't have that here, but in one sense you could say, how do you practice? For the for the person practicing the karmic teachings of the Vedas, it'd be do rituals, be a good person, get good results. But for the Jnana Yogi, it would be turn your back on the world, renounce the things of this world, practice austerity, break your attachments. Right? That's Jnana. So I went off on let me stop here and get questions about this. Usually when I present this, people are like, that's yoga? It doesn't sound very nice. It doesn't, it's one path of yoga. Yeah. Yes, Adrian.
Is it like a next step, where you can also, first of all,
Yeah.
in order to get, as you say, kind of aware that any material, when you reach material goals, you will get this dissatisfaction. It will be important for a student to first achieve these goals in order to actually
Is it important to achieve the goal of karma and enjoy and experience the enjoyment to begin to recognize this isn't what life is all about, and then I want to renounce?
and we all have material desires that I feel like if you don't actually get to them,
Yeah.
even though these things
Okay, I get it.
experience.
If I understand your question right, you're saying, does one have to achieve the goals of karma and enjoy the things of this world to recognize that they are not fulfilling, that they don't give the bliss that is my nature, and to truly let them go and move on to jnana?
So get married or have the job what you're
You do all those, and in a sense, yes and no. Ultimately, no, but commonly, yes. Right? Like, in other words, there's even like the other day we were talking on the show about like being a brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasa, right? Like, in other words, when you're young, you're trained in the teachings, and you're a celibate student. Then you get married and you enjoy life. You enjoy sex. You enjoy home. You enjoy children. But because you're still reading all of this knowledge and you're actually jnana, husband and wife together begin to realize we can let go of this. You know, with every pleasure that we got, it brought anxiety. My business was doing great one day and it seemed, this is awesome. I can buy this, I can buy that. And then my business started going down and I felt nothing but anxiety. Sometimes it was pure anxiety, right? I'm going to lose my business and the economy is going to crash and what's going to happen next? Or you know, no greater thrill or joy than the parent, you know, embracing their child and feeling the love. But then that child can cause so much anxiety and so much fear, so much pain. Sometimes there's tragedy. That's the greatest pain. The world seems like nothing but suffering. You know? So they go through the pleasures and the pains together, and then they let go and they renounce. So, but a wise person can hear the truth, in one sense circumvent all of these. And when we get to bhakti, see, it's a whole other thing. And this is, we haven't gotten there yet, but when we get to bhakti, you see, when you get to bhakti, the idea is I'm not like a jnani that has this goal to break all my attachments. The goal of the bhakti yogi is that they want to develop love for God. And by cultivating love for God, they naturally, automatically, spontaneously let go of all their material attachments. You see the difference? Once you love God with all your heart, with full enthusiasm, and you've tasted it, then the taste of the things of this world no longer attract, and you let go of them automatically without even trying. And that point is an extremely important point, and that point is going to come right off the bat in the second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because the sages are going to ask, they're going to ask him, all the sages are going to find one sage named Sutta Goswami, and they're going to ask him, you've studied all of Vyasadeva's Vedic literatures. You understand them better than any of us. Could you please tell us the essence of them? And could you please share with us how humanity, what is best for humanity, and how can people attain the stage of Atma Suprasidhiti, complete satisfaction of the soul? And he's going to say, his answer will be, that's through bhakti. It's through devotional, loving service for God. It should be done without any attachment, without any desire to get something for it, unmotivated. And it should be done continuously. And through that, you can achieve complete satisfaction of the soul. Now, the next verse is an interesting one. And when we'll get to this, but I was mentioning this on the show the other day too. Sometimes you can put a question between two verses, because one verse is, if I say bhakti is the way to achieve complete satisfaction of the soul, it's the best thing for all humanity, loving devotional service to God, then I might have a question. These sages might have a question. And that question would be, well, we've read all the Upanishads, and when we read the Upanishads, it appears that jnana, renunciation of the things of this world, is what gives Atma Suprasidhiti, complete satisfaction of the soul. Detachment from the things of this world gives complete satisfaction of the soul. Now, you don't see in the Bhagavatam that the sages ask that question, but when you see the next verse, you can see it's an answer to that question. You understand? So one can infer that this question was asked. The next question says, all that you get from jnana and detachment, the bhakti yogi gets automatically without even trying. They're not consciously cultivating detachment, they're cultivating attachment to God, but automatically they get detachment, which is proof that bhakti is the higher, more developed stage. Because everything that you get from the lower stage comes without you even trying, and you get more. Does that make sense? That's why Bhagavatam is so important. We're going to read in the 4th and 5th chapters how Vyasadeva wrote all this literature. He wrote literature about karma, let's say the 4 Vedas. He wrote literature about jnana, the Upanisads. And he's written Bhagavad Gita and to some extent about bhakti, but he's feeling dissatisfied. It's because, and he's thinking, could it be that I was not direct enough to glorify Sri Krishna, who's the source of everything, and love for him and the glory of his pastimes. Maybe that's why I'm not feeling good. And everybody's misunderstanding what I said, and everybody's confused. Some people are thinking this is the goal of life. Some people are thinking this is the goal of life. And then his guru appears to him, Narada, and he says that's exactly the problem. He's going to give him instructions of what you need to clarify. And then what he does is he goes back to Srimad Bhagavatam, which he had already written, and he redoes it. He re-edits it. He adds something to it so that you cannot miss the point anymore. And so then when Bhagavatam opens up, it begins to describe this Srimad Bhagavatam is completely free from what it calls cheating religion, in a sense. The idea that I can bargain with God and so on, you know. And when we say cheating like this, let's say it like this. If I do a ritual as a karmi, as someone following karma kanda, and let's say I go to a temple of the goddess Lakshmi, and my goal in going to the temple is to receive wealth from the goddess Lakshmi. And so I go in there and I bring her an offering, flowers and delicious ripe fruits. And I begin to chant some hymns to her. And those hymns are expressing love. Dear Goddess Lakshmi, you are the most wonderful of all beings. Your beauty is, unparalleled. And your kindness and your generosity is the most... It sounds like I'm expressing love. You understand? But really, I'm going there with a motive. I want something from her. It's not exactly pure love. It sounds like love, right? Just like if someone, again, Dorita, since you're here in the front row. Imagine someone comes to you, Dorita, some man. He's like, Dorita, I love you. I want to give my whole life to making you happy. I want you to be my wife. Marry me. I will, I love you more than anything in the world. And they're saying all these things. But they know, and you know, that they have some other motive, right? They know that Dorita is a secret billionaire. They know that Dorita is a billionaire, and they're saying all these things that sound like love. But it's not love at all. It's cheating. So that's where Bhagavatam is going to open up and say, this one is free of all the cheating. This next literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, it has none of that cheating in it. And then it's going to say it's the work of Vyasadeva in his maturity, right? It's when he's fully giving everything. It says it's the ripened fruit of the Vedic tree. It's the cream of the Vedic literature. In other words, all this stuff had a purpose, but it all leads to Srimad Bhagavatam, which expresses bhakti as the highest pursuit, or pure divine love. Not enjoyment of material energy, not even liberation from suffering in this world, that neither of these is the highest goal of life. But the highest goal of life is the revival of divine love. That is our nature that's within our heart. And so Bhagavatam is meant that we get the point that all of this Vedic literature is there, but it's all leading somewhere. And don't get stuck, like sometimes we see, don't get stuck in Scranton. Right? Don't get stuck on the way, right? Don't get stuck here, don't get stuck here. Go all the way. And if you're really wise, you'll just jump on the elevator and go right here rather than going up the stairs. You go right to Bhakti. Let me pause here for a minute because I just threw out a lot of information, right? And if anything's not clear, or if you have any questions or thoughts or would like to share or reflect anything they said, please, let's set aside a little time for that right now. How are we doing so far? Is clicking in? Making sense? Yes. Your name again?
Ian.
Ian.
What are the 3 features?
3 features.
Yeah, manifesting 3 features.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I'll get to that in a minute, because then now we'll move on to Bhakti. We'll see how much time we have. We got over half an hour. Okay, so this is good. Let's hold that, Ian. And does anyone else have anything about what we've talked about so far? Yes, Megan.
Beyond that, so what is God? So it's just like an impersonal God, or there is no God?
Okay, that's where I was at one point and I never answered it. So great, thank you for bringing that up. And I say this is a little tricky. Because when Krishna speaks about jnana in the Bhagavad Gita, in the practice of jnana, like there's one famous verse. There's one famous verse. He says, Bahunam janmana ante jnanavan mam prapajate. So bahunam janmana ante. Ante means the end. And janma means births, but it kind of implies births and deaths, going through many lifetimes. Bahunam janmana ante. At the end of many births and deaths, going through many lifetimes of practicing jnana. Jnanavan, one who has finally achieved jnana, one who possesses jnana, one who has achieved the goal of jnana, jnanavan mam prapajante, one surrenders unto me. So what he's saying is, one yoga path is that you renounce the world, you walk away from family, you walk away from home, you walk away from your social responsibilities, you go off into the forest, you sit in seclusion, you practice austerity, you contemplate truth, you break all your material attachments through this process. But for what purpose? Because when I have no more material attachments, I'm free to fully give myself to God. I surrender unto Krishna. So at the end of many births and deaths, one who gets knowledge, and with knowledge comes detachment. When you see the world for what it is, you become detached from it. Jnanavam mam prapajante, that person surrenders unto me. So Jnana Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, is a process of connecting with God. But more commonly, there's a whole, if you take the followers of Vedanta, of the Vedic literature, you can divide them into 2 categories, 2 different concepts. One, on one side you could call the devotional side, the belief that all the Vedas and all the Upanisads and all the Puranas and the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, it all leads to understanding God, who is, and this goes to Ian's question, who is a person. And you can love that person eternally. And you remain you, not necessarily in this body, but you're an individual. And God remains God. And each one of us will always exist as an individual in relation to God and will experience the bliss of divine love eternally. But the other camp is saying no. They're saying that our conception of individuality, that I think I'm me and you think you're you right now, is an illusion. We're not 2 separate things, because ultimately in truth, all is one. All variety, all form, all sense of individuality is illusion. This, that we're in a building right now, this is illusion. The whole thing is fake. And when you understand truth, you'll understand that I am, not only that I am spirit, that I am spiritual and not material, but that I am the Spirit, that I am God. And all conception of individuality will disappear, and I will exist just in the divine light. I am the divine light. And there's no duality whatsoever. There's no me, you, there's no black, white, there's no form. There's just bliss of light, like that. So commonly when we talk about Jnana Yoga, it's people aiming for that. because the practice is so much a rejection of the material realm, it assumes that truth is the opposite of the material realm. So if there's form in illusion, in reality there's no form. If there's individuality in illusion, in reality there's no individuality. There's just oneness. Does that make sense? Everybody follow that? I know it's a lot. But to finish that thought, think about this. If I asked you, what's the opposite of being $1 million in debt? What would the answer be? Okay, you see, that's a very, in other words, to be free of debt. That's the way the Jnana Yogi would answer the question. But the way the Bhakti Yogi would answer the question is they would say the opposite of being $1 million in debt is to own $1 million. Right? And being free of debt is just a neutral stage. And so I'll share another analogy. When you were younger and you were swimming, did you have an older brother? Okay. Okay. Sisters may not do this as much as older brothers. I'm not sure. I was never an older brother. I'm not guilty of this. But sometimes you're swimming and some other kid will take your head and put it under the water and hold you there, right? Okay. Older brother? Of course. Okay. So they got your head under the water. Now, when someone has your head under the water, what are you experiencing in the mind? Panic, pure anxiety, right? This has to end. I am suffering. When will it end? When will it end? When will it end? I need it to end. Will it end? And then, so so the mind is 100% suffering. Now they let you out, right? They let go of your neck. You come out of the water. You breathe. Now, in that moment that you get that breath, all of your anxiety disappears in an instant, and it feels like bliss, like, this is what I needed. Now I've got it. I'm free. Right? But we're breathing right now, and it's no big deal, because we understand breathing is just like a neutral thing. But when you're intensely suffering, that breath feels like bliss. And so what the Bhakti Yogis are saying is the bliss of the Jnana Yogis, which is freedom from suffering of the material realm, is really just a neutral stage. And everything that we see in this material world is a reflection of what's happening in the spiritual realm. But reflections are unique because they look just like something, but they're the exact opposite, right? Either when you look in the mirror, it looks just like me, but it's backwards. Or if it's like the mirror's on the ground, it looks just like me, but it's upside down, right? If you're looking from another angle. That's what the Bhagavad Gita uses the example of a tree on the bank of a lake. If you're standing on the other side, you see a reflection, but it's upside down. So they're saying this material world is the spiritual world reflected, and everything's upside down. So the question was, give me the original question again. I'm sorry? So for the Jnana Yogi, what is God? So according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, you could practice Jnana Yoga with the motive of understanding Lord Vishnu and ultimately Lord Krishna. And the process of Jnana Yoga is to break all my attachments so that I can 100% give myself to Krishna without wanting the things of this world. It's kind of like you fall in love with someone and that person says, well, you need to give up this and you need to give up that. You're not fully devoted to me. You're into these other things. You need to let them go. You need to break those attachments. So the Jnana Yogi, in a sense, is trying to break all their material attachments so they can give themselves completely to a personal God. But quite frankly, more commonly, there's this whole tradition within the broader Vedanta that is teaching it different. They're saying that it's not that we practice all this so that we become free to give ourselves to God. We practice it so that we become God. So that we, not even become, so that we realize all along, I am God. But what is God? God is a negative, a devoid of personality. God is just this divine light, like that. So within Vedanta, within the Vedic teaching, there are two schools of thought. And when we say Jnana Yogi, we're usually talking about that. Right? And I'm sorry, you had a question?
No, that if you can repeat the last part, please.
Okay. So when I say a Jnana Yogi, if I'm asking Krishna what is a Jnana Yogi, in one sense, it could mean, theoretically, Jnana Yoga could be practiced as a way of freeing myself of all my material attachments. I'm going to walk away from home. I'm going to not contemplate having a girlfriend and having children and having a comfortable home and all those material things, having money. I'm going to break all those attachments. I'm going to sit alone in the forest. I'm going to contemplate truth so that I no longer, my heart no longer has any attachments. My mind no longer has any attachments. I'm going to break them one by one. Now I can give myself to God, a person. Theoretically, Jnana Yoga could be practiced like that way. But more commonly, when we use the term, people are thinking something different. Their idea is that I'll practice austerity, I'll leave home, I'll do all these things, and then I'll realize I am God, right? That not only am I spirit, not only am I the energy. You see, the Bhakti Yogi is going to say that we discover that I'm the energy of God. I'm eternal. By nature, I'm blissful. By nature, I'm free of illusion. The Jnana Yogi commonly will be thinking, no, I'm not just the energy of God, I am God. God is energy, only energy, not a person, no form. Right? And so now here's an interesting question. How do the Jnana Yogis conceive of bhakti? Devotion, love. And what they'll commonly say is, bhakti is a nice thing to practice, but it's only to get to another level. Right? Because if you, rather than just run around this world trying to take the things of this world for enjoyment, if you recognize, let me make an offering in the temple to a god or goddess, express some devotion through my puja, and even in my heart, maybe develop a little attachment. I love Lord Vishnu. I love the goddess Lakshmi. I love Lord Shiva. But all along, you see, this is the key. We're getting to a key idea now. You ready? The karma yogi, they want something when they do their puja. What do they want? You tell me. Huh? They want material enjoyment. They want the things of this world. When the Jnana Yogi does a puja to Lord Shiva, what do they want? You're close. Huh? They want liberation. They want freedom from suffering. All right? So they still want something. All right? It's still like someone going to Dorita and saying, I love you, Dorita, but really they want something. Right? Like say your father was the president. In Colombia, you have president? Yeah. And does the president have the power to grant any criminal freedom? No. Okay. And in America, that's a good thing because they really misuse it. Presidential pardon. So in America, the president, any criminal, they can just say, you're free. It's crazy a little bit, right? Sometimes it works well, but a lot of times not. And it really got put to the test recently. and so, like, say you had presidential pardon powers, Dorita, right? And so you can grant someone freedom from the prison, right? And so they're saying, I love you, and this and that, but really they just want you to grant them the pardon. So in a sense, that's what a Jnana Yogi is, they want, right? They want freedom from suffering. It's still a selfish idea, right? Now, you can look at it two ways. In one sense, this Jnanic idea is far more developed. It's far more evolved because they're looking at the material world and they're seeing it as false. It means they've come a lot further than this person. This person's deep in illusion. This person's seeing the illusion. But Prabhupada called it the last snare of illusion. Right? Snare, like you get caught on something, right? No, but not just bit, but it means like a snag, like say you're walking on a thorn, yeah, like just a little thing at the end, but it stops you. So he called this idea that I am God as the last snare of illusion, right? Yeah. So does that answer your question, Megan? Okay. Okay, so now we move on to bhakti. And we can do this relatively quickly, but we're going to have much more to say about this. And then when we come back tomorrow, we're going to jump here and we're going to go here. And then we'll have like 2 days to really get into that second chapter. Okay, so in bhakti, the karma, some ways you could look at this, you're all familiar with the dialectic process. It means there's a thesis, and then there's an antithesis, and ultimately there's a synthesis, right? So here the thesis for the karmi would be, this world is meant for enjoyment. And the antithesis to be that, no, you're completely wrong. This is a place of suffering. The synthesis in bhakti is that there is enjoyment and there is suffering here. But really, I don't look at this world as a place for me to enjoy or a place for me to escape. I see it all as the energy of God and all meant to be engaged in God's service. And that's what this world is. Even if it is a virtual reality, I can still serve God in the digital world. You understand? So this person wants material enjoyment. This person wants freedom from material suffering. This person just wants love. If I'm in the material world, in the virtual reality, if I'm in the spiritual world, in the reality, makes no difference to me ultimately. Because if my heart is full of love for God, I'm in the same reality wherever I am. Right? I'm in the same consciousness wherever I am. And that is my true consciousness. That is my nature. Like that. So the person following the karmic teachings in Vyasadeva's literature, they see this world as reality. The Jnanakandi, the person that's following the Jnanic teachings, they see this world as a place of illusion or suffering. The Bhakti Yogi sees it's real and it's illusion. It's real and it's illusion. In other words, it's a reflection of something that's real. And even the reflection is a real reflection, right? The Jnana Yogi says this world is 100% illusion. It does not exist, which I found almost impossible to take fully seriously. I believe that that is due to a psychological need for there not to be a God. That I'm going to believe that nothing exists, that all of us are not sitting under this roof right now and discussing. Now, what the Bhakti Yogis say is, it's unreal in the sense that it's a reflection. It's like if I look in a mirror and I see my image in it, is it real or is it false? If I think that that's me, I'm in illusion. And if I understand that that's not me, but it's a reflection of me, I'm seeing truth. And so the way that the Bhakti Yogis see this world is it's illusory in the sense that it bewilders us. It's like a virtual reality. A virtual reality, is it virtual reality real or unreal? It exists. So in that sense, it's real, but it's unreal in the sense that it's a fake world. You understand? So virtual reality, is it real or unreal? It's both. Is this world real or unreal? It's both. That's how the Bhakti Yogi sees it. It make sense?
Nyanya could be in some way like some form of atheism or not?
I'm sorry?
The Nyanyas can be looked like a form of atheism. They don't believe in God or
Atheists.
atheists. Yeah.
Are Jnana Yogis atheists?
Or
Sometimes a Bhakti Yogi will say they are. Or Buddhists, for that matter. Right? Because they don't have... and that brings us to the next question. Right? Who is God? Right? So here they just see the generally the karmi accepts all the gods and the goddesses, all the demigods, as they're all equal. They're all this. They all have their different responsibilities. They're all suppliers.
give him something.
Yeah. Now,
Just a giver.
you give them, you get something, and there's many of them. Common Hindu kind of way of thinking. The Jnana Yogi sees there's all the different gods and goddesses. It doesn't matter which one you worship, because it's all just the one manifesting in a particular way. But not only that, but their form is actually illusion. So even they may be worshiping, let's say, Lord Shiva. Commonly, the Jnani will worship Lord Shiva. They don't actually believe Shiva truly exists. Or, I am Shiva, you are Shiva, everything is Shiva. Right? So their acts of devotion or whatever are motivated in that way. And they believe, and you see, there's one story. One time, Srila Prabhupada was walking with a group of his disciples, and I believe it was like on a beach. And there was some kind of like part in the beach where it kind of went up a steep little step up, kind of like it went up a big step. And so one of Prabhupada's disciples went up first and then reached down to help him up. And so he took his hand and he pulled him up, and Prabhupada got up that step, and when Prabhupada got up there, he pushed the disciple away. And the disciple kind of felt, did I do something wrong? You know, it seemed a bit abrupt and insensitive, and so the disciple was saying, what did I do wrong? Why did he treat me that way? And then Prabhupada said, this is the way the impersonalists think. They're worshiping the God to get something, and once they've got it, I don't need you anymore. Right? So that's the so they're so here God is this supplier. Here you could say these conceptions of God are unreal. We are all God. We are all the absolute truth. But not even to say we are all. I am. And I am all there is. And it may be manifesting in some kind of illusory realm as individuality, individual consciousness. But individual consciousness is an illusion. It's really impossible to grasp. It's really a philosophy that takes twisting and turning and to
How come they get it so wrong after working so much on
because because you get what you want. Right? Because there's a
lot of meditation and breathing.
I don't want a boss anymore. I don't want anybody above me. Then you'll get there. It takes like a certain trust to be able to say, I'm happy that I'm not the most powerful being in the universe. I'm okay with that. You know, and I do believe I can love wholeheartedly, and that there's someone else that's worthy of that love. Not everybody is ready for that. You know, it's scary because we go through experiences in this world, and and so when we hear someone describing devotion, it may make us uncomfortable. I don't want to be a servant eternally. You know, forget that. But if you understand that there's great pleasure in loving service, then you're like, oh, I'm happy for that. So I believe that that's kind of the psychology behind.
After all the work, they actually still wrap in false ego, even though they want to get rid of the ego.
Yes.
They don't want to serve anybody or the end.
It's another form of false ego. And as we mentioned before, the last snare. Even you've broken all your material attachment, there's one last thing and it gets you. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Got 10 minutes left. Other questions, thoughts? That was a lot of information we got. I'm impressed with everybody. Yes, Yvette.
Like the jnanic thought is kind of like black and white thinking, like just throw everything away. Like I know it's illusion, I don't want to deal with it. So it's kind of like
A negation.
yeah, like I'm missing out somewhat in like we're all here for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? So they're just kind of just like, oh no,
Yeah.
I don't want to learn the lessons of this world.
And it's similar to the Buddhist thought, like nirvana or shunyavad. These are called shunyavad, ideas that like ultimately life is just void. For this, the Advaita Vedantin, this type of Jnana Yoga, it's usually reality is light and bliss. And again, for the Bhakti yogi, that is that feeling of bliss, it's two things. One, it's just neutral, it's just the negation of suffering. But two, it's temporary. It's a feeling like I've become one with everything, but eventually it wears off. And then you need to go one way or the other, back into the illusion or to the reality. Because by nature, we love. That's what we're designed to do. So you can exist in a, it's just like we say sometimes, you get a trip to the Bahamas, right? You're slugging it out in New York, and it's the winter, and you're suffering, and you're stuck in your little apartment, and you got all these people you work with, and you don't like any of them, and it's just hell. And then you save up your money, and you go to the Bahamas. And then, well, I'm saying Bahamas because you're just sitting on that beach, and there's nothing but light, and nobody to distract you or disturb you, and you feel such a sense of relief. But after some time, yeah, big deal. Or even let's say like this, like you want someone to be there with you, right? Someone to share it with, You're getting very, it's lonely and that you're unfulfilled, yeah? And so what the Bhakti yogis, the Jnana yogis are saying, that feeling is an illusion. But the Bhakti yogis are saying, no, that's how we're designed. We're designed to love. We're made to love. That and that is called our dharma, right? Dharma. That is what we're made to do. That is our purpose. We were designed by God to love God, and through loving God, love every living being. And there's no escaping that. You may kind of escape it for some time, but you really haven't escaped it. You may try to escape it through material enjoyment, but you're never going to find that Atma Supersiddhiti. You may try to escape it through merging into the divine light, but you can only do it temporarily before you feel a lacking. It may even be like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but still, eventually you have to go one way or the other. And the question is, do I want to be the center of the universe? Then you go into the illusion. Do I want to serve the center of the universe? Then you go into the reality. And it's as simple as that. Right? Melissa. I'm sorry, you're reading about yogis?
Yogis that are like living in caves.
In caves, yes. Renunciates, yes.
Are they maybe beyond or practice?
Yeah, good question. So these renunciates that are living in caves, could they be Jnana yogis? Could they also be Bhakti? Yes, they could be either. Most commonly, Bhakti yoga is practiced. There's two ways to practice yoga. Bhagavad Gita is going to lay this out. Krishna uses different terms in the Bhagavad Gita, but to simplify it, there's yoga where you walk away from society. And that's called karma sannyasa. I renounce sannyasa, my karma, my work in this world. I renounce my social responsibilities, to be a mother, to be a father, to be a husband, to be a wife, to be a business person or a teacher or whatever it is. I walk away from all that. That's one way to practice yoga. And another way to practice yoga is called karma yoga, but I don't want to confuse things because karma yoga could be a broader category or more narrow category. And so here I'll just say the other way to practice, one is to disengage with society, and the other way is to engage with society. Commonly, the Bhakti yogis engage with society, but they can walk away from society as well. But what makes them a Bhakti yogi is that their purpose and their practice is developing love for God. So like their practices will be, the practices of pure bhakti are like hearing Krishna's pastimes, chanting Krishna's names, meditating on Krishna's form, serving Krishna's form, etc. These are activities that are 100% designed to cultivate love, prema, for God, for Krishna. And that's called Bhakti Yogi. Now, commonly the Bhakti Yogi does that while living in society, but they could wander off into the forest and meditate on Krishna in their heart. And that's also Bhakti Yoga. So it could be both. Sure. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Yes, Matthew. Oh, he's Johanna. He's turning it over to you.
Oh, okay. No, just going back to Ian's question.
Yes, Ian.
Yeah,
Oh, we didn't answer that. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so for the karmi, generally they're thinking of all the gods and goddesses. They may have a favorite one, or they may be worshiping them all as suppliers of material desire. The jnani is thinking, I am God, and I will merge into God, and my godness will be revealed to me, and then I'm going to realize there's nothing but me. There, again, the nuance, the sidebar, there may be a bhakti, a person whose goal is bhakti, who's practicing jnana first, let me free myself of all my material desires to surrender unto Krishna. But more commonly, when we say the jnani, they're thinking of I am God, we are all God, there is only God. We just need to remember it. The Bhakti Yogi says God manifests in 3 features. And the feature that the Jnana Yogis are interested in, the divine light, they say that is one of the features of Krishna. But it's only one of his features. It makes sense? But he's got another feature called Paramatma. That's called Brahman. The divine, all-pervasive energy of God is a divine light. And the Bhakti Yogis say that is real, that does exist. Even the Jnana Yogis may experience it. They may write about it in the Upanishads. It does exist, but it's only one feature of God. Then they'll say there's another feature called Paramatma, which means God is present within the heart of every living being, every human, every plant, every animal. Paramatma. Atma means Paramatma. Atma means the soul or the self. Param is a prefix which means like the supreme. So Paramatma means the supreme soul or the supreme self. And what everyone accepts that there is Paramatma, but the Jnana Yogis think I am Paramatma. But what's very clear in Bhagavad Gita is that Paramatma is Krishna, and that the two are different, that the Atma and the Paramatma are different. Okay? Made of the same energy, but one is the source, and one is like the sun has sunlight. Paramatma is the energetic source. Atma is the emanation of, the spark of. Yeah. And so there's the divine light, Brahman. There's Paramatma, there's God within the heart of every living being, even the plants, even the animals. If you're alive, if you are born, grow, reproduce, maintain for some time, gradually become diseased, and ultimately die, then Paramatma and Atma were both in that form. And then when they leave that form, they move on to the next form. And then the third is called Bhagavan. Bhag means opulences, and Avan means the possessor of. Bhagavan means God is a person, God that you can talk to, God that you can shake hands with, God that you can embrace, God that you can love the way you love your child, the way you love your friend, the way you love your lover. But more completely and more absolutely and more perfectly, you can love God as a person. And that person is the source not only of all of us and of everything that we see and experience and all the gods and goddesses, but that person is also the source of the Paramatma and the source of the divine light. Ultimately, it all ends in the person. That there's personality behind everything. And if you go back behind everything, the ultimate personality you find, sweet baby Krishna. Yeah. Did that help, Ian?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll go more into all of that kind of stuff too. And that was your question. And Matthew, you had a question.
I guess I just see some sort of similarity between all these three, and I really enjoyed the bank account statement that you used. You know, I see the karma yoga as the one that's trying to be glorified or trying to receive something. Like
Yes.
I'm bowing to you, so you bow back to me.
I want you to give me something. Yeah.
And the jnana is like, you know what, I'm out. Like I want to like study enough so I realize that I'm just nothing.
Yeah.
And the bhakti is maybe I'm like the negative money, like I owe everything to God. I'm going to be glorifying everything, but I'm seeing like the practice and like the the lines between them, like the threads that they share.
Yeah.
And like the bhakti is like practicing love to receive divine love. But what if the karma yogi is practicing love to only receive love? Like
Then they're a bhakti yogi.
then they're actually just bhakti yogi.
Yeah. See, there's a thing called karma yoga, the more narrow definition of karma yoga, which means I keep my occupation, I keep my responsibilities. I'm going to be a responsible father. I'm going to be a responsible husband, even though there's an element of illusion in that. Like, say, Dorita was in her virtual reality, but she said, I have a virtual husband who's a real person, but his body is virtual, right? He's in the virtual reality like me. Might even be a she on the other side, but in a male form or what, you know, like that form isn't necessarily that person. I have my husband. I have my job that I play in the virtual reality. I'm going to play them all, and I'm going to play them well. I'm going to be responsible, and I'm going to do them well for the pleasure of God, as a service to God. They look like a karmi. They look like they're as materialistic as anybody else, but their motive is different. And they're cultivating a certain type of freedom from ego through it. Rather than going to work and thinking, I'm the center of the universe, the money is going to serve me, I'm going to buy the things that make me happy, they're thinking, I'm a servant. And the money happiness doesn't come from anything that I can buy. Happiness comes from, it is my own nature, it just needs to be uncovered. Whatever money I get doesn't even belong to me, right? I have a responsibility on behalf of God to care for my family. That's my service. So that money I make will be to serve God by taking care of my family. I have leftover money, let me serve society with that. Let me serve God's further, parts and parcels by serving them. And in this way, one person's going to work cultivating, I am the center of the universe, and the other person's cultivating, in their mind, I'm a servant, I'm a servant. I'm happy to be the servant. I want to be the servant. And that's truth. And by contemplating it daily through that work, the false programming in the ego becomes changed to truth. And now the real truth, my real nature, and that which is in my mind become harmonious. You understand? By nature, I'm a servant, a loving servant. Now in my mind, I've accepted fully I'm a loving servant through this practice of karma yoga. And now my mind and myself are no longer in conflict. They're harmonious, or you could say they've united. And what's another word for union? Yoga. Right? So now there's no longer a disharmony or conflict between my mind and myself. And yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. When our mind becomes programmed in a way that's harmonious with ourself, then we've achieved yoga, then we've achieved freedom, then we will experience our own true nature. Okay. One more thing? Oh, Matthew, one more thing?
Well, I think that the bhakti, the foundation of the teachings is really to serve and no expectations.
Because that's what love is, right? Because love means I do it out of love. I do it because I want the object of my love to be happy. I do it because I want to bring pleasure to the object of my love. That's called love, right? Unmotivated. Right?
And how do you fall in love with God?
How do you find love?
You fall in love. How you fall in love?
Well, you see, God expands unlimitedly for pleasure. And the highest pleasure is love. So he has so many energies that they create the setting in which he can experience love. One of his energies is, let's say, Radha, right? The divine feminine. But she's an individual. She is made up of the energy of Krishna just like everything else in existence. But she's an individual that's empowered. Sometimes she's called the Hladini Shakti, which means the pleasure potency. But the highest pleasure is love, so she's like the love potency. And so her potency is so strong that this is one of these kind of deep theological kind of topics that the bhakti yogis contemplate and relish and marvel at. that Krishna is the most powerful of all forces, but actually love for him is even more powerful than him, and he becomes conquered by it. So how does God become conquered by his own energy? In one sense, it's a beautiful divine mystery. But that's how the great sages describe it. Yeah. And Ian, you had one last question.
Yes. The more narrow realm of karma yoga, why is that more under the umbrella of karma? Because it seems more like bhakti.
Okay, great question. So if I were to draw out a diagram right here of the 4 common paths of yoga, they would be Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I could take the first 2 and put them under one umbrella, and the next 2 and put them under a second umbrella. So the umbrella that would go over Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana Yoga would be karma sannyasa, or disengaging from the world, leaving my responsibilities behind, family, social, leaving it all. And then the other 2 would go under a broad category called karma yoga, literally. Krishna will use that term, but he'll use the term in 2 different ways. So let's skip that. Let's not call it karma yoga because it may be confusing. And let's call it disengagement from social life, leaving the world behind. Or no, I'm sorry, engagement with social life, engaging socially. So now there's 2 categories under that. One's called karma yoga, which literally means the yoga of action or the yoga of engagement. And the other one would be bhakti yoga. Now, bhakti yoga technically, and this is one nuance that this diagram doesn't quite account for, is that bhakti yoga would be, the edge of bhakti yoga would be coming out from under the umbrella and going under this other umbrella too. Can you picture that? Am I confusing you, or is that picture showing up in your mind? I'll show you. It's like this. Disengagement. I'm just going to write dis. And this is the umbrella. And here's engagement. And an umbrella. Okay? Karma sannyas and really karma yoga. But then under here you have Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Okay? They both fit neatly under those umbrellas. Even they don't entirely, because it's just tricky, because they could be doing this with a devotional attitude from the beginning. The reason I do Ashtanga Yoga is because I want to realize God in my heart with love. But let's not make this too nuanced a conversation. Now let's put Karma Yoga here, the more narrow definition, and let's put Bhakti Yoga here. That, or let's even go like this, right? There's an edge of Bhakti Yoga. If you took all the Bhakti Yoga practitioners, maybe 99% of them would be engaged with the world. But there might be 1% that have disengaged with the world and are practicing devotion in seclusion. Okay? So what's the difference between this bhakti yogi who's not in seclusion and the karma yogi? That's your question, correct? Yes? Okay. So the karma yogi is described. What is karma yoga? This more narrow definition. And karma yoga means I have the jnana that the jnana yogi has. I recognize this world is illusion. I recognize it's entangling. I recognize that I am spirit. That's all called jnana. And I recognize that when I operate in illusion, I entangle myself in this world. There's reactions for all my actions. I'm locked in a system of karma. I'm locked in a system of action and reaction that causes suffering. The karma yogi understands all of that. The jnana yogi's response to that truth, to that knowledge, is I renounce everything because it's entangling. The karma yogi says, I get it just as well as this guy gets it, just as well as the jnana yogi gets it, but I'm going to continue to operate in the world with that understanding and with a different motive than the average person that's not a yogi at all. I may look to you and appear to be a person that's totally materially attached because I got a job, I got a family, I got a home, I got a wife, I've got kids, I got all these things. But internally, I don't see any of them as mine. Internally, I recognize I'm not this body. Internally, I recognize that all these relationships are temporary, that my position is temporary, that my reputation is temporary, that all of this is just virtual stuff. And what I'm doing is, like, even my job where I walk away with a paycheck at the end of the month, I don't do it to get money to buy things of this world to find happiness. I do it as a service. And because I don't want to become entangled. Now, all that being said, I still may not have a conception of God, or I still may not have a desire to love God. I just want to be free from the reactions of this world, in a sense. Karma yoga does not necessarily imply my goal is to love God with all my heart. Bhakti yoga means exactly that. From beginning to end, whether I'm doing it in this world, whether I'm doing it in seclusion, whether that's my goal, even through Ashtanga yoga, like I practice the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga so that I can meditate uninterruptedly on Krishna's pastimes out of love. But the goal of the Bhakti yogi is love for God. That's their focus, that's their point, that's their motivation, that's what they're into, and it's reflected in their practices as well. So I may be going to work, making money, using it to support my family, using it to support others, all as an act of bhakti because I'm doing it because I want to please God. A karma yogi may be doing something very similar, but it's not. It doesn't have to be to please God. Or even if it's to please God, it still may not be with the desire to love God, to become completely drowned in emotions of love for God. But that's the bhakti yogi. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, I think we're a little bit over time. We covered a real lot of ground. And I hope it hasn't been confusing, because I really threw out so much, but you were all taking it in quite well, it felt like. And whatever we haven't understood today, we're going to understand more tomorrow. And I'm hoping that this conversation is really going to give you a framework in which to begin to approach the Bhagavatam. And when we approach this section of the Bhagavatam and these chapters, then you're going to understand the whole rest of the Bhagavatam. Every story that comes up, you're going to say, oh, I get it. This is another way of Krishna showing the problems with this kind of thought, or the problems with this kind of thought, and the superiority of this kind of thought, and why this leads to greater happiness and satisfaction. It's being illustrated in one way after another, after another, after another, and that's what Srimad Bhagavatam is. All right? Thank you all so much. Everybody on Patreon, I appreciate your tuning in, and those that will tune in the future. I'm just going to try to save the chat to see if any of you had any questions. I can get to them tomorrow. You know what? I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. Maybe some of you can save the chat just in case I do it wrong. Oh, there we go. I got it. Save chat, show and finder. I've got it. Thank you all so very much. We will see you tomorrow, I think at the same time. We'll let you know on the show tomorrow if we're doing it at the exact same time. I think it will be at the same time tomorrow. Hari Om Tat Sat.